like there's no summer soldiers or sunshine patriots here today. Looks like there are a lot of true believers in the revolution, and that's what counts. Thank you very much for coming and for that very nice welcome. And obviously you have to be a true believer to come out and spend a little time in a little damp weather, but wonderful. This is a real opportunity to restate our convictions and our beliefs, because we are in a serious mess. We are going to do something about it. We're in the middle of a campaign that is going to prove a whole lot that our campaign not only is alive and well, but this country is going to be changed. You know, this morning in the news I read that China was complaining about us getting too aggressive in the South China Sea, and they were warning us. Now, isn't that rather ironic? We borrow money for China, we run our military operation, we go over there and pester them with our military. What is this? How many countries are we in now? We're in about 50 countries, 900 bases. We just recently opened up a base in Australia. I don't know why we have to occupy Australia these days. So it's pretty ironic that we are doing this. As far as I'm concerned, putting troops and vessels and pestering the Chinese right now would be similar to allowing the Chinese to come into the Gulf of Mexico or the Chesapeake Bay and declare that it's their territory. So it's about time we change our foreign policy, because it is such an important issue. It contributes to the war and the killing and the finances. So it is now time to bring the troops home. Foreign policy is a schizophrenic foreign policy. It's on again, off again. We support one dictator 1 month and then we get rid of him. But this has been going on and on. It's just not once or twice. At one time we were on the same side as bin Laden, and things happened to change. One time we supported and we were on the side of Saddam Hussein when we wanted him to invade Iran. So we at one time were close allies of Noriega. We now are still allies with a country called Saudi Arabia. 15 out of the 19 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia, and they practice Sharia law. I would say that we ought to look more carefully at what the founders told us and taught us and encouraged us to follow. It is a non-interventionist foreign policy, free trade and friendship with other countries, and no entangling alliances and no nation building. You'll have to, why don't you spin it? Turn. It has to be turned over there. No, you have to loosen it. You have to loosen this one.
Straighten them out!
Okay. No, I don't know. Tighten it. All right. Okay, good. It is obviously very crucial that the foreign policy changes because of the cost. In the last 10 years, we added $4 trillion to our national debt. We shouldn't be adding, even on our side of the aisle, the Republican side of the aisle has a proposal to so-called balance the budget in 30 years. My proposal is to cut $1 trillion the first year and balance it in 3 years. But of course, to do that, we have to change our attitude about what the role of government should be. And the role of government, according to the Constitution, is not to police the world, and it's not to have a welfare state. It's designed to have the national government have very limited powers to protect liberty and provide for a strong national defense. And that's it. But today we are facing a major crisis like we have never faced before. There's a debt crisis, there's an attack on our civil liberties, and there's an attack on our credibility around the world. What might likely happen and what eventually probably will happen is when we come down financially and we have been seen as a bully around the world, there's going to be a lot of piling on. That is why it's crucial that we change the direction of the country, change the attitude about how we operate around the world, and under those circumstances we would be seen quite differently. But if we have the bankruptcy which is impending, we have major problems. That is why the revolution in this campaign is so crucial, to change the direction of the country and look to our traditions of where we are, defend the free market property rights and a non-interventionist foreign policy. You know, in our early history, of course, we had a major undertaking overthrowing an empire. And in some ways, that is what we're doing now. I believe we have an empire and we have a constant increase in the tyrannical actions of Washington, D.C. It was somewhat similar before when the British were the tyrants and they had the empire and we wanted our independence. Today, though, it's a bit different because we don't want separation. What we want is to get rid of the people who believe it's their role and their responsibility to run our lives, to police the world, to run a monetary system which is corrupt. So this is what we have to change, and this is what this revolution is all about. You know, Thomas Paine, back in those times, he wrote his first pamphlet 2 days before Christmas on 1776. And that is where the famous lines come from about, these are times that tries men's souls, and this is the time we have to band together. Those words were so inspiring that Washington read that to his troops on Christmas Eve, the time he crossed the Delaware River going into Trenton. Was so much of an inspiration that there was a surprise victory at Trenton, which led to the victory, of course, our victory in the Revolutionary War. The crisis today is every bit as great. Sometimes I think it is much greater because of the financial conditions of the world, the debt bubble that exists. We've had problems in the past, but we have never been so broke. We have never been in a situation where so many of our civil liberties have been taken from us, and we have never had our occupied troops so far around the world. So it is crucial that this changes as quickly as possible. But the good news is that there's a lot happening today. There's good news in this campaign, and there is certainly good news about what's happening with the revolution that is going on. I sense that the revolution for the return to liberty, and matter of fact the improvement and the building on the liberty that we had, actually started several decades ago. It was a preliminary leading into what has happened in the last 4 years, and that was the intellectual movement that has occurred throughout the country. And the seeds have been planted, and the fruits of that intellectual revolution, the definition of sound monetary policy, Austrian economics, and sound money, and getting rid of the Fed. But, you know, four years ago, in November in '07, we had a similar rally right nearby here. And after that happened, of course, we had the election, and then we had the convention in September. In September of '08, and there was a lot of concern and there was a lot of enthusiasm, but there was a lot of concern about what would happen to the people involved in that campaign 4 years ago, because it was said, are they going to be like the Sunshine Patriots? Are they just going to disappear, or will this lead to some changes? Fortunately, I can report to you there were very, very few Sunshine Patriots 4 years ago, and there's a lot more supporters than we have today. So the preliminary efforts were intellectual prior to '07, but the campaign that happened between '07 and '08 was, I think, the first leg, the first episode of what the revolution was all about. And it made a mark, and it didn't go away. Matter of fact, people stayed. And then the Campaign for Liberty was organized, and for the last 4 years, that has grown and infiltrated. There's been political action and economic activity going on, and educational opportunities going on. People come to my office now, and sometimes I look at them, they're rather young, and I say, when they want to talk about the Fed, they've been studying about the Federal Reserve and why we have to get rid of the Federal Reserve, and I'll say, how old are you? And he says, oh, 14. So there's something inspiring a whole generation, because I look at them, I said, boy, I didn't have the biggest idea what's going on when I was 14. So, but there's a lot of reasons for that. One is the need for it, the crisis that we're facing, the bankruptcy of our country, the knowledge that our treasury is bare, the financial system is close to being in shambles, the knowledge now that we know that the welfare state doesn't work, it impoverishes the people that it's supposed to help, and it enriches the people that are enriched when the bubbles are being formed. So this is a big difference and a big opportunity, an absolute need. But the people are recognizing this, not only the young people, but many, many others now. There's a coalition. Before it was a recognition by the young people of realizing the severity of the problem, but now it's across the political spectrum. And it's across the age spectrum. We're coming together now and bringing a lot of people together. And it's not a narrow group of people in a minority party. It's not the base of one single party. But the revolution that's going on is changing people's hearts and minds, and it's going to be pervasive. It has already invaded the independents. It's already invaded the Democrat Party, and they're looking to us to lead the charge back to liberty. And of course, I think the third stage now, we had the '07 campaign, we had the Campaign for Liberty, and now we've had this election 11 and 12. All I can tell you, it has far exceeded all my expectations. When I go around the country, I meet literally thousands of people, and they're very much involved. Many states now have elected individuals. We have men like Mike Doherty representing us in New Jersey. It's just really great. But there are some states that, and we have not heard of it, and this is the best way it is. It isn't like it was a top-down organization. It was spontaneous. The brush fires of liberty have been lit in the hearts and minds of so many people. It's no longer a minority, a restless minority. It's a gigantic movement that is occurring, and is there every reason for us to be optimistic that this will continue, but we have to also realize it will not go easily. It will be difficult. Thomas Paine said tyranny is like hell and is not easily conquered. The people I know in Washington represent that, but let me tell you, they will not go away quietly. When you think about when you think about this is called political struggles and the political arguments that go on in Washington, it's all over power. It has nothing to do with ideas. They're all wanting to know who's going to have the power and who's going to get the money. But guess what? We've run out of money, so that's why they don't even offer budget resolutions anymore. They just go on and argue and fight over who wants power. Well, we want is our freedoms back. We want to understand what liberty is all about and why we should never tolerate a president that believes it's upon him, that he upon himself can declare that American citizens can be assassinated. We'll repeal that first off. Of course, all laws that were passed by executive orders are up for removal by executive order. So as president, I can use the executive order to repeal all the bad executive orders. Last week, just a couple of weeks ago, the President wrote an executive order that was renewed the Defense Production Act, but he had a few phrases in there. The Defense Production Act was supposed to give emergency powers to the President, dictatorial powers, which it shouldn't be on the books, but Obama changed the wording. He says in times of war, and he added, in times of peace, he can take over everything. Of course, just last week, the Supreme Court didn't help us out much by a 5-4 ruling. They said that all American citizens, no matter what the circumstances, can be strip searched without probable cause. And of course, we know that that provision in the National Defense Authorization Act should be repealed as soon as possible. This idea that the military can arrest American citizens, put in prison, and denied an attorney, they're reversing history all the way back to 1512. You know, the right of habeas corpus. So these kind of liberties that are being undermined, if we are complacent enough and we can watch what they do to us at the airports and have an announcement that the president can assassinate American citizens without due process of law, the responsibility falls on us, and right now more on us. Anybody would turn out to an organ, you know, on a day like this, the responsibility is even greater, because the majority, the large number of people in any society or any changes that come about are rather complacent. They're not involved. But if you discover what's wrong and you discover what the answers are, the burden falls heavily on you to do something, and we have that responsibility. So I am so glad you're here today. So we should be very pleased with what is happening when we think of all the problems that we have and all the improvements we have. But there is no doubt that that one subject that we talk about so much is something that has not been done in 100 years. This is the first time the Federal Reserve and monetary policy has been an issue in a presidential campaign. So we have an obligation not only to audit the Federal Reserve, but next year, when we have the opportunity, where you're going to up front offer a bill to repeal the Federal Reserve Act and get rid of it. Somebody asks me all the time, well, what are you going to replace it with? Well, let's replace it with the Constitution. All we have to do is say, oh, only gold and silver can be legal tender, then it would not be serving the special interest. The entitlement system has deceived a lot of people. A lot of people say, well, we have to help the poor, and we have to have a safety net, and people are sympathetic. But guess what? The housing program was sympathetic. We were going to give everybody a house. But who made all the money when the housing bubble was being blown up? And who got bailed out when it burst? And who lost their jobs? And who lost their homes? This is the reason that we have the opportunity to point out that this whole entitlement system doesn't work. The foreign policy doesn't work. The monetary policy doesn't work. And this is the reason our revolution and these changes will be successful. One reason I'm convinced that we'll be successful is one thing that is required is passion plus reason. Reason comes from logically arguing and understanding the fallacies of the current economic system. And that was what the intellectual groundwork laid down for us, the intellectual argument. But after you have that, you also have to have a passion and determination to go out and fight for these battles. And this is what we have, and this is why we should be very encouraged to know that we can win this. I often think about what was saying back in the 1960s when it was right-left paradigm, and they didn't quite understand that the definition is tyranny versus liberty. But back then they said, you know, if you weren't a bleeding heart liberal when you were 20, you didn't have a heart. But then they also said that if you weren't a conservative when you were 40, you didn't have a brain. But let me tell you, if you believe in liberty, you both have a heart and a brain. The efforts that have been put forth in the last few years are very encouraging. The fact that we take a non-interventionist foreign policy, of course, we have been challenged so often in the past that, oh, if you don't vote for the war, you don't support the troops. How much nonsense can that be? But the proof is that if you look at all the money donated by active military personnel and veterans, it's our campaign that gets This is the reason, of course, the foreign policy will be changed, because the militaries are sick and tired of it. It has been ruthless to our military. Our defense is actually the support from the troops, the wearing down of our troops has been very detrimental to us. And what about how many veterans now are suffering for lack of care? Now we have an epidemic of suicides by our military. It's time for us to wake up and say the purpose of the military is to defend this country. Now, this is one place where I think we can be very proud of. We, as a people, and with our military, we are capable of defending ourselves. Better than anybody else. We have more weapons than everybody else put together. Nobody's going to invade us. Why do we have to go out looking for dragons to slay and looking for enemies and stirring up trouble around the world? But our real threat, we take the oath to defend against all dangers, all enemies, foreign and domestic. Let me tell you, it's the domestic enemies that we have near here today that are tearing down our liberties that we must take over. We need to address some of the social problems that we have here and that undermine our liberties. There's one, once the government embarks on this notion that it has to take care of ourselves, and you can't take care of yourself if the government wants to take care of you, nothing is left to your liberties. So we understand that. We understand what the First Amendment says. You can practice your religion, whichever religion you want, or not, no religion at all, just so the government stays out of it. We also know that intellectually you have the right to read whatever books you want and study. But when it comes to your own body, we can see way too much is say the government can dictate to us our diets, what we drink, what we smoke, and what we put into our bodies, and that is wrong and should be changed. They talk about the drug war and the necessity to tell people not to use drugs. Well, of course, the war on drugs has been an absolute failure, and the federal war on drugs ought to stop. We ought to cease and desist on the drug war. We've had false promises from the administration that would be compassionate about people who use marijuana for medical reasons, but they're still putting people in prison for non-violent uses of drugs. What we need to do is recognize that drug addiction is a disease. It's not a crime. We ought to treat it more like people who drink too much alcohol. If you do harm to people, yes, that is a crime. But if it's your own business, your own body, it's up to you. I would give you some strong advice. Strong advice, of course, would be very cautious with it, but I also know as a physician that addiction is much worse on prescription drugs than they are on the illegal drugs. And this whole thing that the silliness of the drug war ends up saying that, well, something that the founders did, Thomas Paine and the others, they thought it was perfectly all right to raise hemp. We did that up until World War II. But for some ridiculous reason now, because the elite is a little bit like, we're not allowed to raise hemp. We're allowed to raise it in Canada, and then we buy the products from Canada. It's an industrial product. Well, why don't we wake up and say, let people make up their own minds. It's their decision to make. If there's danger in something, you're the one who has to decide about the danger, not the nanny state in Washington, D.C. So it would help us a whole lot in the protection of our civil liberties if we just got rid of the war on drugs. The war on drugs has been much more dangerous than the drugs themselves. But the wonderful thing is there's an answer for this, and the answer is found in understanding liberty. Liberty comes out from us, to us, not from our government, but it comes to us in a natural way, in a God-given way from our Creator, which means that we ought to own our lives. We have a right to our life. We have a right to our liberties, and we ought to have a right to keep all the fruits of our labor.
But if this is the case, we should be able to bring people together. It shouldn't be just conservatives that should agree on one issue and just liberals on another issue. But the whole idea of liberty should bring us together. Because we don't want to tell other people how they personally use their liberty or how they spend their money. So why shouldn't all of us come together for different reasons? We do this in religion. We come together on religious freedom, not because we agree on the religion, and besides, if we legalize freedom of choice in religion, not once do they accuse us of saying that we endorse that particular religion. But as soon as it comes to personal habits and social habits, all of a sudden you say, oh, they might do A, B, C, and I don't like that, and I don't want to endorse it. You're not endorsing it. What you're endorsing is freedom of choice and letting people...
But the most important thing there is that if you have freedom of choice, which we will strive for, if we have freedom of choice to deal with our own lives, means that we have to accept the responsibility of the consequences of all our choices. So if we don't do well, we can't go to our neighbor and say to our neighbor, well, I didn't do well, so I want you to take care of me. And it's also illegal in a free society to go to the government and say, I want to send the government to my neighbor to take from my neighbor what I want from him to take care of me. The best rule to follow is the Bastiat rule. The Bastiat rule is if you and I can't do it, like we can't counterfeit money, the government shouldn't be able to do it either.
People don't accept liberty because they're frightened by it, intimidated, they don't understand it, they have been told for years that the free market doesn't work, that the Depression came because of free market capitalism and the gold standard, and that's been ingrained in our system. It's been taught for generations now, except in the last decade, especially the last 5 years. Guess what? The information is getting out. The truth is getting out, and thank goodness for the internet. But you know, we had a victory of sorts a couple of months ago when SOPA and SIPA were about to be passed, and many of you wrote and said no, 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 and they withdrew it from the House floor and the Senate floor. But this very week, they're going to be bringing up another one. It's every bit as bad and maybe worse. It's seductive, and it has to be defeated as well. Mike Rogers has that bill, and if you haven't told your representative about it, let them know that you don't need that bill. We don't want the bill. It's an attack on the internet, all because they want to protect privacy, of course. So we have to do whatever we can to protect the privacy and the integrity of the internet, because this is the way the information is spread. But we know that there are so many more people today that know about what's going on, and they are seeking the truth. And this is what life should always be about, is seeking the truth and trying to find out what really is happening. And governments resist this. Governments don't want you to know the truth. The governments have this tendency of turning things upside down. Our government was strongly said that the Fourth Amendment was written to protect your privacy. And that if you have a free society, that you should have open government. Now we have totally secret government, and you have no privacy left. We need to reverse that. We had a grand experiment, the best in the history of the world, and we drifted away from it 100 years ago. All of a sudden, for some reason, they started dividing freedom up into two pieces: economic freedom and social freedom. And that isn't the case. It has to be one and the same. If it's your life, it's your lifestyle, and it's your money, and it should be one thing, and that is the protection of liberty with limitation of government. So we don't have to go back to the Dark Ages. They accuse us, oh, you're going back to the Dark Ages in the 19th century. Well, some good things were started then, but we want to improve on it. We want to build on it. It was a short test, and freedom is a new idea in the history of time. Guess where the Dark Ages are? What is going back are the tyrants in Washington that want us to go back to dictatorship, and that is what we won't put up with.
Now, we can renew this. We can renew this spirit, and that is what's happening, and that is why we should be so encouraged about the way things are going. Literally hundreds, if not thousands of people now, millions of people are joining us. We don't know exactly what will come out of the election. All I do know is every election should be run very seriously. And sometimes I'm challenged, and they said, "Oh, how can you run for this election? You know you don't have a chance." And I said, "How do you know that?" So when you run to win. It's very important. I've won elections on 12 times, and that sort of puts a stamp of approval on what we're doing. So we don't know exactly what the outcome is, but we do know that the continuation of the spirit of liberty will persist no matter what, and that's what really counts as well. So it's hard to say about how the time will be and when things will happen.
We sit here watching like, oh my God.
But it is going to get worse if we don't change things. We cannot continue to run up deficits of $1.5 trillion a year and print the money and try to tell people around the world there's so much resentment against us that we have to face up to it. And we will be facing up to it when there's a bankruptcy crisis, which means the rejection of the dollar. We can't keep printing dollars and expect the world to take care of us by taking our money. And this will come, and interest rates will rise, and there'll be higher prices, and we will have no more people believing anymore what the government tells us. Oh, there's no inflation, everything is just fine and dandy, and there's full employment, when the employment rate is very close to 20%. No, the time will come. It could come in a month or two, or a year or two or three. But we are prepared. Our numbers are growing. We know what the message is. We're getting more and more people in places. There are state party operations throughout the country. The news this past week in our campaign on delegate counts has been fantastic. It's been And you know, one of the litmus tests of when a campaign starts to fade, two things happen. One, the money dries up, and the other, nobody shows up. I want to tell you what, we're still getting a lot of people showing up even in tough weather. And guess what? The money bonds are still working. Thank you very much. That is a vote of approval and no reason why we're going to be walking away, and this will continue. So once again, I want to really thank you for coming out. It's a real inspiration.
This kid.
A society that will provide the best chance for obtaining peace and prosperity, and that is what I sincerely believe. In a personal way, I think of what a free society is all about is ownership of our own lives and responsibility for ourselves. For me, I would suggest that it is a worthy cause, and that is to seek excellence and virtue. Governments can't do that for us, and if you think that's a worthwhile venture in life, this can only be done in a free society. So seeking virtue and excellence and seeking a society that offers peace and prosperity, we have logic on our side, and we also have the humanitarian instinct on our sides, because they tell us too often that we don't care about the poor. If you care about the poor and you care about prosperity and you care about peace, the only way you can achieve that is through free markets and sound money and individual liberty. That is the answer. So continue our efforts. This campaign has a few months left to it. It's not going to end like some people pretend. You know, the media says, "Where's Ron Paul gone? Where's Ron Paul gone? Where's his campaign?" I want to know. I want to know, where's the media been? So anyway, spread the message, be optimistic, and have fun doing it. Thanks a lot. Thank you.